what we'll do is we'll maybe just get started now. I can see there's a few more people still kind of trickling in, but for the first minute or two, it'll just be very introductory, but we'll get started. So we've got a few questions that we want to get through, and then I appreciate that there will be questions from everyone in the group also wanting to kind of learn a little bit more about Beam, and we'll make sure we get those to the end. But just as we get started, I just wanted to thank all the attendees that are joining us here at Beam. Thank you so much for joining, and it's really fantastic to have everyone on this webinar. Just as a very quick introduction to myself, my name is Max. I'm a member of our People and Talent team here at Beam, and I'll be kind of moderating the conversation today with some help from my colleague Sophie, and then some other help from our fantastic caseworkers here at Beam. So we've got 3 members of our team who are going to join us today. And what we're really here to do is learn about our casework team and what it's like working at Beam. And as I say, we've got 3 individuals from our team here with us today who work directly with Beam's members. So that's the individuals that we support, and we help them in kind of creating life-changing impact for our members. And so what we'll do is shortly, we'll do a quick introduction to our panelists today, and we'll work through some common questions that we get from applicants that join Beam. We'll talk through what casework looks like, and that'll probably be 25 to 30 minutes. And then what we'll make sure to do is we'll hand over to questions from the attendees today. And what you can do is you can pop any questions that you have in the little Q&A box that should be available to you. And what will happen is my colleague Sophie, who you should be able to see on the screen at the moment and is giving you a lot of wave, she'll be picking up questions throughout the conversation. So she might be able to help in answering some of those questions for you. And what she'll also do is she'll collate the kind of most common ones towards the end of the session, and we'll make sure that we've got dedicated time for that. But I guess without further ado, I can see we've got a good number of attendees now, so I thought it might be nice to get started. And I just wanted to start off by getting quick introductions from the 3 members of our team here. So I'd love from Daniela, Amira, and Ruben. Daniela, you're first on my screen. So I was wondering if you could just give a very quick kind of 60-second introduction to yourself. Perhaps what was your life before Beam? When did you join, and what's your initial focus within the team? And maybe one thing that you're most interested in working on right now within the team.
Yes, sure. So hi, everyone. I can see we have a lot of joiners. Very exciting to tell you a little bit more about Beam. So I am an operations lead at Beam, and that basically means I am leading the team of operations executives, mainly working outside of London. I'm based in Sheffield. And before Beam, I used to work with our Rob Sleepers charity in Sheffield, where I was supporting individuals to re-engage with employment. So I've always been like in the social sector, trying to support people to stable lives. And I think the most important thing right now for us, or for my team that is working with the remote OEs at Beam, is just establishing our presence outside of London, supporting a lot of people outside of London, and helping changing as many lives as we possibly can. So I'll be telling you more about that shortly after, but that's a little bit about me.
I've just seen I was on mute. Apologies. Thank you so much, Daniela, for that introduction. And Amira, you're next on my screen. So would you be able to give a quick introduction to yourself as well?
Yeah, so hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Before I joined Beam, I had just graduated from the University of Nottingham studying maths. And then after graduating, I came here, and that was last September. I'm now an operations executive in local government. So basically, when we work with local governments, the members we're supporting, I work with them. And initially, when I joined Beam, I was part of triage, which basically is a function within Beam to help kind of filter the members, make sure we're the right service for them, kind of check they've got all the documents they need if they want to get into housing, if they want to get into employment, and just basically give them an introduction to Beam. But recently, I moved to the housing team, so I support our members with finding that housing, helping them pay for their first month's rent deposit. And something that's really interesting right now, which we're trying to tackle, is like, currently, there's a lot of places where there's not much housing, and especially in the private rented sector. So we're trying to like be really innovative in the way we're thinking. How do we tackle this? How can we overcome that blocker, that barrier, to really support our members the best?
Fantastic. Thanks, Samira. And Ruben, you're next on the screen. So would you be able to give us a quick introduction to yourself as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, so unlike Daniela, I didn't come from a background in social work. I was a consultant before this, and I did, mainly like project management, finance consulting, and yeah, quickly realized it wasn't for me at all. So quickly changed course and found Beam. And I joined when I joined the company, I joined in local government, and kind of like Amira, I started in jobs, and then moved over towards the housing side as I kind of, got more, kind of like grew in the company. And I'm most interested at the moment to be working like directly with landlords, and it's just kind of very spontaneous, very quick paced work. And yeah, I'm just absolutely loving it. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ruben. And I'm going to stick with you. And you've kind of given us a quick overview of what your role looks like. And I was wondering, like, one of the most commonly asked questions we get from candidates is what an average day of a caseworker may look like. And some of the attendees on this webinar may have seen we have a number of videos that we try to present to people. And it's so hard to give this kind of average day in a life of, because everything is constantly changing. But Ruben, I was wondering if you can maybe give a quick insight into what maybe a typical day or even a typical week looks like as part of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's very cliche to say, no 2 days are the same, but like I genuinely believe that wholeheartedly at Beam. And I think part of the reason why that is the case is because we're in the people business and everybody's so unique, and every single person we help has an entirely different story. And when you actually, see these and hear these people's stories, you see them face to face, and you see what a lot of these vulnerable people, individuals and families have been through, it's very, very specific, to their circumstances, how you have to react and how you have to, work around. And I guess that's why it's so exciting as well, just having so much variety in your work. It really does, just speak to how varied and amazing the work we do at Beam is. So I think, now a typical day for me is very different to what it was when I first joined. And I think that also kind of just reflects how quick paced the environment is at Beam. We're a charity, we're a startup, we kind of do it all. And when I first joined, I had 4 managers in my first 6 weeks at Beam, which is a lot. And it was very chaotic, but yeah, I just, you just got to like immerse yourself in how, much and how quickly the company is evolving. So when I first joined, I was essentially doing mainly assessments. I was assessing the members coming through the pipeline into Beam. And I guess that kind of process is to find out, as much as whether they're in the right place to join our service, whether we're the right service to help them. And that was my kind of like main thing that I was doing day to day at the start. And then now it's very much more housing focused. So other people will assess the people who come into the company, and then once they're deemed as the right fit for us to take on and be able to help them in the most impactful way, then from there I will try and rehouse them. So that's kind of that's the day in the life for me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ruben. And I think what that really nicely kind of encapsulates is obviously the different types of different type of work you can do here at Beam. You can obviously support a really wide variety of members and supporting them in different ways as well. And I think that's one of the things that people that join Beam tend to love is the variety and the workload that they can, and knowing that they may be supporting one member group or on one type of contract for some time, but then obviously they can change. And that's obviously an opportunity to learn a huge amount about supporting a variety of different individuals. So thank you for a bit of that insight. And what I would say is that for anyone that has any questions, as I said, based upon what Ruben said, or anyone that says, feel free to drop them into the Q&A and we can pick up on that later. But one other really common, on you go, Ruben. Yeah.
One more thing. If you want to know more about a day in the life, please go on Beam Instagram, because there's some great day in the life content on there, which will actually show you and give you more of a visual on what a day in the life is like. So yeah, go check that out.
I love that plug. I actually have that Instagram video up on my screen, so maybe in a minute I can pop that into the chat for people to see. But thank you for that plug, Ruben. And what I was going to say there is just another one of those really common questions that we get asked by candidates is the kind of what different roles in our team look like. And for people that are in the attendee list, they may have seen that as part of our open roles, we have things called operations executives. We have senior operations executives, and Danielle has also mentioned that she's an operations lead. And Danielle is someone who kind of started in the team as an operations executive, was promoted very quickly into the senior operations executive, and then now has been promoted again. I was wondering if you could maybe just give a little bit insight into those roles as well.
Yes, of course. So I was going to talk about that a little bit. So I joined Beam almost a year ago now, and I joined as an operations executive. So that's a really good starting point to work in the front line with our members, where you support them into housing or into jobs, kind of similar to what Ruben said. And then I was promoted to senior operations executive. And basically what that meant is I was still working in the front line, but I was working in more projects, more leading the strategy of how operations executives support members. So one of the projects I did was create a partnership with a company in Leeds called High Speed Training, where we managed to get some free courses for our members to upskill them and hopefully get them into jobs, into better jobs. And all the things that, for example, people do. One of my colleagues, Barbara, she created a really cool matrix to signpost people. So she used all of her amazing Excel skills to create this really, really cool matrix to signpost individuals to different organizations. So I think the difference between operations executive and senior operations executives is how you work more on the strategy, still on the front line, still with members, but just working more strategy and also supporting new operations executives. So a lot of the seniors are now supporting in shadowing and helping with the onboarding of a lot of people that are joining Beam. So it's a lot more responsibilities, but I think operations executive is an excellent start to like your career at Beam.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Daniela. And you obviously not only are kind of a big part of our team, but we're also the first person that we hired into a remote role in our team. And I think there may well be people who are attendees in the webinars today who are not based in London and based outside. And I was wondering if you could maybe just give some quick insight into what it's like working as a remote caseworker in our team. So what it's like being a remote OE, how often you come to London, maybe how we deliver work in person and virtually as well.
Yes, so I think this is very exciting about Beam, and we're growing so much that we need operations executive everywhere. And it's very exciting because that means more people will be able to access our service regardless of where they're based. So when I first joined 10 months ago, I was operations executive for the north of England. And that what means is basically I support people in our region. So I work with people from Manchester all the way to Leeds and supporting people in that region. To go back to your question about how often do I go to London, the HQ is still in London. So we tend to go to London around once a month to see everyone, to be there for like Feel Good Friday and be part of the company, which is very exciting. And we try to coordinate these with all the remote OEs. So we have a wonderful team, someone based in Manchester, someone based in Nottingham, someone joining in Cardiff, and myself in Sheffield. So it's really cool that we have like now a group of remote OEs. We still work a lot with our members remotely, but we also deliver in person too. And we go to London around once a month to see the rest of the team and be part of like that, the startup experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Daniela. It's great to get that insight, I guess, both from the London perspective and the remote perspective. And one of my favorite things about being here at Beam is actually just what you mentioned there, the Feel Good Fridays. And for those of you who perhaps don't know what that is in our team, it's effectively the opportunity for all of us to come together. So anyone who's based in London, we are always together in the office on a Friday. Every second Friday, we'll have a meeting where we all come together and we share things like member spotlights. So those are examples of stories of members who have kind of made progress in their support journey here at Beam. And I think one of the lovely things about that, particularly for myself and Sophie, who doesn't work on the front line, is we still get the opportunity to feel so connected to the member of the work that we do, which is really fantastic. And yeah, Danielle, I'm going to stick with you. I promise this, I think this will be your last question for a minute, and then we can bring Ruben back in. But you're obviously very heavily involved in our recruitment process, not just for our remote roles, but also for the broader casework roles that we do within the team. And I guess, obviously, the people who are attending today might be interested in what it's like to go through the application process at Beam. And I guess from your perspective, I'd love to get some insights as to what the kinds of things you might be looking for from a successful candidate that we bring into the team.
Yeah, of course. And I think this is very important because a lot of people ask me about like experience and stuff like that. And I think for us at Beam is how do you live our values in your life? So I'm sure everyone that is a candidate might have seen a document called Beam Life. It tells you everything you need to know about Beam, basically. When I did my interview, I remember I read that from like beginning to end to just try to understand what the company was and if I was a good fit for the company. And if the company was a good fit for my values too, which it is. So I think that is the first start. And I think overall, we assess how would you interact with our members. So I'm helping in the later stages of the interviews to understand how would you work with our members, if you can balance that empathy and reality aspect, but then also what kind of like thinking outside the box mentality you have. So because we're working with individuals with different circumstances, we have a lot of challenges on a day-to-day basis, and we love some creative ideas of what can we do. So for example, what we were speaking about at the beginning of supporting people in rural areas to the private rented sector, what kind of ideas do you have that maybe we've not thought about? So bringing that fresh perspective, but also bringing that like energy and that passion to live our values. I think for me, those are like the keys to like a successful interview.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm sure there'll be questions coming in on top of what you've kind of described there, which we can go through later, Daniel. But thank you for that. And I would just underline the point you made, I guess, around bringing creative solutions to problems. And again, this is one of the reasons that I joined Beam, is the scale or the potential for scale that we have for kind of growing our impact here at Beam. And for the attendees that maybe haven't seen exactly how we work, effectively how we work is we have relationships with government partners, and they refer those members to us. And as caseworkers, everyone in this call and in the rest of our team is working directly with those members and working with them through a support journey towards getting those outcomes. And what's super interesting is that when we get those outcomes for our members, we get paid by our government partners. And the reason for that is we're creating effectively a taxable saving. So we're creating, when someone gets a job, that's income tax coming into the Treasury, it's a reduction of benefits coming out of the Department of Work and Pensions. And when we get someone into housing, what that represents is a saving, usually for local councils, in a reduction in cost of temporary accommodation, things like shelters and hostels. Now, the reason I bring this up and the reason I connect it to your point, Daniela, is because we have effectively a sustainable business model that allows us to reinvest the money that we get from government back into the business so that we can go on to support more members down the line. What that means is that we're constantly bringing on new member cohorts that we might be working with. And to Daniela's point, we're constantly figuring out creative ways to build our support model to be as accessible as possible for new member types. And that's, I guess, one of the things that really excites me about being here at Beam, is those constant new questions that we have to answer and that ability to think outside the box. So thank you for bringing that up, Daniela. And I guess, Amira, one thing that I wanted to reflect on with you is, as Daniela mentioned, a big part of the way that we work is working towards those kind of ambitious social targets that help us scale and help us to support more members down the line into jobs and into housing. And I was wondering if you could perhaps provide some examples of how the kind of ambitious targets that we work with come into our work, and maybe why you think they're important for us.
Yeah, happy to. So yeah, obviously, like kind of Max explained, those targets to start, if we meet the targets, we kind of then can keep growing as a business and support more people. So just an overview of what those targets are is what we call lives changed. So with our members, that's either getting them into housing or getting them a job. So when we partner with like a local government or a council, and they say, oh, can you kind of help this many people, you then will, as a business, we get a wide target of we need to get this many people into housing or this many people into jobs, aka like this many people's lives changed. And then that will filter down into each OE. We'll then have individual targets of like, okay, I need to get like my members, six of my members housing this month, and it will like vary by contract. But yeah, those targets are there so that we can keep growing essentially. Now, Ruben kind of said that, yeah, we're a charity, but we are also a business, and that's very true. So obviously there is a target-driven atmosphere. And so if you can like work to targets, are quite good with knowing, okay, my targets this week haven't really been fulfilled, so I need to focus on a certain cohort of members, maybe not another cohort, then this is a really good atmosphere for you to kind of like grow and put those skills into use. I think since we started in 2017, we've supported nearly like 2,000 of our members into life-changing outcomes, which is obviously a huge amount of people in such a short amount of time. And that is because we are able to reach these targets. Now, there will be times when the targets are quite difficult to reach, because when you're house hunting or job hunting, a lot of it is out of your control, like finding privately rented housing, that not a lot of that is in our control. But that's where your team really comes in, and like your manager comes in, because you work really collaboratively to try and like problem solve on, okay, I am 3 members away from my target this month. So that clearly means that there's a blocker somewhere. What can we do to kind of overcome that? Is there any like tactics that other people in the team are using that I can take on? So when you do have that target and there is a bit of a stress of, okay, I need to try and reach it because I want to support my members, your team and your manager is kind of always there to kind of have your back and problem solve with you. So whilst it's a target driven atmosphere and there is that pressure sometimes, it's never a pressure that you're feeling alone. And it's a really nice atmosphere actually that everyone's kind of working towards a common goal. And I think the reason why we care about those targets is because obviously we care about our members and we want to help as many people as possible. And that's kind of where it comes into it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Amira. I think that's probably really helpful for people to get an understanding of, I guess, why those targets exist. And as you say, it's really about supporting more members over time and helping us to scale our impact, not just nationally, but internationally. And I guess for us, the aim that we're working towards is effectively to become a global standard for the way that we support those who've been left behind. So if you're the type of person that's really interested in having an outsized impact in an organization, but also in society, then I would say this is a really fantastic atmosphere for you to come and join. And one thing that the attendees may have seen is just into the chat, I've just dropped our live tracker, which is effectively like a live data dashboard where you can see the number of outcomes that we've had for our members. And Amira said that we've supported nearly 2,000 members since we started in 2017. The goal for us, and the reason that we're having this webinar to invite so many great people in, is so that we're looking for the people that can come into the business and help us 10x that. So if you're excited by the idea of like turning that 2,000 into 20,000 as fast as we possibly can, then this is really the kind of right atmosphere for you. And Ruben, I wanted to come back to you because I remember when you first joined the business, you were going crazy on these outcomes and you really got off to a very quick start. And I just wanted to kind of pick your brains for everyone in the conversation to understand perhaps what is your secret in being able to progress members through their support journey so quickly and into those outcomes.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely try and answer. I think it's definitely like a mixture of things. And I think one is having just such amazing role models at Beam and people who have carved out the path for you already. And like, you know, there'll always be people, you know, leaving as more people come in, but there's such great people to model your work off. And, you know, you'll always find your own cadence and your own style as a caseworker when you come into the company. But having those more experienced people who have been there and done it, you know, not only just like to support you professionally, but also just as friends to talk off the record, and yeah, just I guess dump a bit of an emotional baggage on as well. You know, people that you can actually see as friends. That was a huge tool that helped me just really feel comfortable at the start and just like crack on and get to work straight away. So that was definitely like one thing that I've like really appreciated that's helped me, I guess, succeed quite early on. Another is just kind of following on from that, just having a bit of a baptism by fire in terms of like getting started with the work. And, you know, like I'm seeing now there's people coming into my team who have onboarded, you know, like maybe last Monday, and they're already starting to take on their own casework now. When I joined, maybe it was like 3-4 weeks, slightly more cushioned, like soft entrance. And you know, I think the quicker and quicker we get started reflects how much we're growing as a company. So I think that's like another thing to speak to. And then finally, in terms of like driving specific outcomes and trying to get things like completions where we get a member into, you know, sustainable long-term accommodation, or we find a member a job where they could have been out of work for months, even years. Have some really, you know, big social blockers or, you know, other kind of blockers which have stopped them getting those outcomes. Being able to help them, I think, just comes with, I guess, an acceptance of creativity and, you know, a bit of hustle, and that sometimes you might have to tap into some, you know, sales-like tactics and things to, you know, I guess, think a little bit out of the box and just try and get something over the line any way you can. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was almost baiting Ruben to talk about his sales-like tactics. I was very fortunate when I first joined Beam to be sat kind of 2 rows behind him, and I would hear some of the ways that he would communicate, and I was like, yeah, I want this job. I want to be that person. I want to work with Ruben. And I think just your calm, polite, but like don't take no for an answer kind of attitude, and really making members feel amazing, I think is incredible. And I hope that there will be people on this webinar who have the opportunity to come and join the Beam team and can come and learn from Ruben, because my goodness, I feel like I've had an education by sitting so close to him in the office. So thank you so much for that, Ruben. The last question that I wanted to cover before we return to attendees' questions was just to give this group an understanding of, I guess, what life is like here at Beam. I guess we've talked quite a bit about the role, we've talked a little bit about the organization, but I want to give this group an understanding of, I guess, the culture. And another really big thing that we focus on here at Beam is trying to hire a diverse team into the organization. And for us, that is incredibly important that our members feel seen and understood by their caseworkers. And therefore, we make sure we have a real focus on hiring for gender, ethnicity, ability, and experience diversity within our kind of hiring funnel. And also once our candidates have joined the team. And I'm so glad to have Amira in this conversation because she's a co-chair of our internal committee, which is kind of focusing on promoting equality and diversity within our workplace. And that kind of internal committee is called Be Me. And Amira, I was wondering if you could please tell me a little bit about your responsibilities as being a chair of Be Me and maybe some examples of some of the recent topics or projects that you're working on within the team.
Yeah, happy to. So at Beam, we have like a really nice culture of like people being included and people being empowered. And we set up Be Me because we wanted to make sure that as we grow, that culture doesn't get lost. So Be Me is kind of like a group and a space to ensure the representation of each individual in Beam's community. So that's like people who work at Beam, our members who we support, anyone externally, just anyone who comes into contact with Beam through like celebratory and educational events. And we also wanted to focus on like collaboration with the leadership team because we know that DEI and like being inclusive has to kind of come from the top and funnel down if it's going to be like made throughout the company, and also wanted to work with them on inclusive policies. So my colleague Kat and I are the co-chairs of Be Me, and it's a really cool kind of thing that we do in Beam. And what we do is basically try and focus on different areas each month and see how can Beam make sure we're being inclusive, make sure we're being like aware of what's going on in the world, kind of keeping that culture around. So last month was obviously Pride Month. We did loads of fun events like organizing an external trip to go and see like a theatre production kind of thing. We made sure that internally we also kind of event where we could go down, have some drinks. Every week we were like shouting out really important people in the like LGBTQIA space who we think people should be aware of. The month before that, we focused on like mental health and well-being. So we were kind of looking at inside of Beam, how do we take care of people, especially in roles as an OE, because it is obviously quite an emotional job. You're really bonded to your members and you want the best for them. So it's obviously quite hard sometimes to make sure you're taking care of yourself as well as taking care of them. So we got loads of great feedback from loads of OEs, loads of other people in the Beam team on how we can be doing better. Because obviously it's great to celebrate that, yeah, when you come into Beam, you are supported, like your manager is there, your team is there, but we want to make sure we're keeping up that support and we're like seeing if there are any gaps, is there anything we can be doing better. So far, we've actually had a really good response from people. So even though it's just me and Kat, what we do each month is ask people, would they like to be involved? So this month we're focusing on like psychological safety and making sure that we're being safe when we're working with our members. I basically reached out to all OEs or anyone in the team and said, yeah, if you'd like to be involved in this month, we're going to be having a drop-in session. So we get people to come in, tell us their thoughts, and then we feed that back to the senior leadership team. We're going to be having kind of like a bit of a lunch and learn. So getting someone from the OE team to share their knowledge on how to work with members in person and make sure you're keeping yourself safe. Next month, we're focusing on Refugee Month, and we're going to be focusing on the work we do with refugees. How can we be safe around them? How can we make sure we're keeping them safe? Just all the work we do and kind of educational topics. Each month is different, and each month, if there's something that like piques your interest or is like really resonates with you and the reason why you joined Beam, like we have an open space to come and get involved, come to the drop-in sessions, just give us our thoughts and our feedback, and then we kind of go from there and plan what do we need to do. So far we've actioned things like making sure that we're going to send out a mental health and well-being like passport. So if you feel like you need your job to be kind of adapted or feel like you need adjustments for your role, you can kind of have this passport which you take with you as you go through different roles or have different managers, which means you don't have to constantly be explaining what adjustments you need or what's going on in your personal life. It's already been approved and you just have to let your new manager know, and that's it. We're going to be making sure that we have a space where people can come and talk to people who are mental health first aiders, because we have quite a few here at Beam, so we're trying to really like showcase that, so like show more visibility on who they are. So if you're an OE, you're struggling a bit, you need a bit of a help with a decision, you know exactly who to go to, and lots of other like really fun stuff that also come into the policies and the way that we're really incorporating DEI and the way that we support everyone at Beam through like the way we work. So it's been really exciting, and there's always a chance to get involved. And it's also not like you have to commit loads of time to it, but every 6 months we will be hiring a new co-chair. So I will be leaving after 6 months, and there's someone else who will get the chance to kind of do this really amazing fun parts of the job.
I get the feeling you'll still be very heavily involved as much as you
Yeah,
can. I mean, what I can sense, and I think everyone probably in this conversation can sense, is the just incredible passion that you have for this work. And I think it's really, really brilliant that for some reason, I'm not quite sure how we manage it, we bring really wonderful people like yourself into the business who not only care about supporting our members, but care about the individuals that we have internally as well. And I think this is so important. And those were all the questions we wanted to run through. And I just wanted to thank everyone who's been popping things into the Q&A box. And please continue to do so. We're going to turn to your questions now. And one of the reasons that I'm really glad that we've just talked about BeamE is because obviously a big part of that is about feeling included in the culture here at Beam, but also feeling physically and mentally well. And based upon some of the conversations we've been having today about, I guess, the atmosphere here at Beam, the fact that we are ambitious, we're target driven, I think that's obviously fantastic in the sense that it helps us to support more members. But equally, it's something that we need to be mindful of in making sure that we create an atmosphere where we don't push ourselves too hard, or where potentially we don't lead to issues of kind of concern around burnout. And that's something that we really focus on here at Beam. And I was wondering, Daniela, if you could maybe walk us through your experience of how we kind of manage the support that we provide to members, with also making sure that we look after ourselves as well.
Yes, of course. And I think this is one of the reasons why I joined Beam, because I love working in the social sector, working with people, but I also wanted to take care of myself and my mental health. And it is obviously quite a demanding job. We're working in the frontline with vulnerable adults, but at Beam, we have really good resources to help you with that. So some of the things we have is what Amira was saying, but also we have a pod, which is a space for operations executives to come together without any senior leadership team to discuss any challenges that they are facing, and basically to see how they are feeling. Is very led by us as operations executives, and it's a space for us to share any, for example, difficult cases that we have, or if we had anything that's been really difficult to deal with in the last couple of weeks and we just want some support from our team. We also have a budget for counseling, which I've used since I started Beam, which is excellent. And shortly we're going to have unlimited counseling for all of our operations executives, which is so good. And we always try to make sure that everyone accesses this. Apart from that, obviously, all the other benefits that you can see on the website. But I think what I can say from my experience working in the social sector, this is one of the best things that Beam does really, really well, and is support us as caseworkers to make sure that we can deliver and we are okay. And I think we have such a strong team bond that you won't feel alone doing this work that is still very, very demanding. So hopefully that brings a little bit of light. But
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Daniela. And we've actually just announced, I think you mentioned there, kind of a deeper level of kind of external counselling support on top of the kind of internal support that you mentioned there. So thank you so much for that. And I can see the questions are really flooding in now. So thank you so much, everyone that's sending them through. We really appreciate it. I think just to manage expectations and to be really realistic, we're not going to be able to get into every single one of those questions before we finish up at 1:45. So what I would recommend is, if we're not able to cover off in one of the questions that you have, absolutely please feel free to email us at careers@beam.org after the session, and we'll be able to kind of work through those questions with you, and that would be absolutely fine. But I don't want anyone to leave feeling like they haven't been able to ask their question or get it answered. Just trying to work, what we're trying to do is, I can see Sophie is furiously working behind me to try and make sure that we're covering the main topics. And one question that was asked that I did want to pick up on is a question from Sukena. So thank you so much for this question. And it's one that I can see there's a few similar themes popping up. And there's a question there around, I guess, how we are structured as an organization and how, I guess, we make money in order to be able to grow and support more members. And the question is about us not necessarily being profit driven, and the fact that we do crowdsourcing to raise money for our members. And the question specifically is, how do we run as a business? And I think this is a really fantastic question. And again, Danielle, I was just wondering if you could come back in on this one in terms of Beam being a charity in the sense that we accept donations from the public, but also being a social enterprise as well.
Yes, and I think this is very important to just clarify. So the things you see on the website, the crowdfunding part, 100% of those donations will go to our members. So for example, when we put in there, we paid £1,000 for deposit money that will go directly to our members. And that's because that side is the BMAP charity. And we are a social enterprise. And what that means is what Max was explaining at the beginning, that we have partnerships with like local government and central government to pay for all the overheads of running this organization, growing and supporting more people. So it's a very clever business idea. And I think it's worked in the sense that we are a social enterprise, and the more growth we have, the more people we can support. And so just, yeah, hopefully that clarifies a little bit the aspect of being separately.
Yeah, absolutely. I always talk about us having kind of like two organizations under one umbrella. The first is the charity, and we take donations from members of the public and businesses, and 100% of money that's donated by them goes directly towards supporting our members. So none of that comes into the running of the business. And then we have that partnership network that we have with governments, and they pay us because we create that saving for them and getting those outcomes for our members. So thank you for going into that, Daniela. Ruben, I have a question for you, and it's based upon something that you mentioned right at the start. And I'm sure there are many people in this conversation who maybe don't necessarily of social impact, perhaps are not caseworkers, but actually feel like they have a huge amount of the kind of transferable skills that might be required to work in this role. And the question is from Megat, and she's asked you, Ruben, how did you manage that pivot from the work that you were doing? I know you were working in finance and consulting. You didn't mention I think you've done work as a PT as well. So you come from a variety of different backgrounds. And how do you recommend that someone maybe not coming from a casework background can demonstrate that they align with Beam's core values without maybe having that background in perhaps social work or support work?
It's a great question. And I think it, I guess, starts with passion, to be perfectly honest. You know, it doesn't really matter what background experience you have as much as it matters how much you care about being here, you know, in the moment, and actually dedicating your full energy, time, focus to delivering outcomes for, you know, for the most vulnerable people in society. So I think that's probably the main thing that I would try and, you know, reflect on if I was thinking about joining Beam. You know, do I have the passion to work in this industry, and do I care enough, you know, to basically just take on all of the baggage associated with being a caseworker. You know, I'm for the people, you know, listening in, and I'm not sure how many have done casework in the past. It's a very, very challenging, demanding role, as you can imagine. And I didn't realize quite how tough it would be. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it's also the most enjoyable. And I think that all connects through caring about what I'm doing. So I think if you're thinking about applying to Beam, don't necessarily think that it hinders you not coming from a background where you have specific industry experience. It's more about showing and, you know, convincing the people who are going to be interviewing you that you care enough to be here. And I think that's the main thing. So yeah, hopefully that kind of goes some ways answering it.
Thank you, Ruben, for that. I would completely agree with that. And just in relation to that question and thinking about potential applications, we're effectively assessing candidates based upon a series of characteristics or criteria that are tied to our values. So I can't remember who it was that mentioned, I think it might have been you, Danielle, that mentioned our Beam Life document. And what that does is that effectively lays out the values that we have here at Beam and effectively the characteristics that sit underneath that. So we're not actually necessarily looking for someone that comes from a very specific casework background. One of the things I love about this team, I mean, Daniela comes from social enterprise background, Amira, you came straight out of university, Ruben, you came from finance. If I looked behind me in the office today, I would be able to see estate agents, teachers, junior doctors, people that have come out of legal professions. So we're not actually looking for that specific experience, but we're looking for that connection to the values. So certainly when I interview people at first round conversations, I'm always looking for how well people can live out those values. And I would say, yeah, absolutely, Ruben, one big part of that is passion for Beam, passion for the way that we work, which is obviously quite different to how some support organizations work, and passion for working directly with our members and creating outcomes for them. So thank you for that, Ruben. Amira, I'm gonna pitch one question at you, if that's okay. And the reason I'm gonna ask you this question is because right at the start, you mentioned that you kind of started in our triage team, and now you're kind of working more directly with members in that kind of overall end-to-end support journey. And there's a question from Tilda here about training. And I know you've also just started in the OE role, but I'm sure you're very heavily involved in training people that come into our triage team as well. So I was wondering if you could give a bit of an introduction to our training process at Beam and effectively how we think about supporting new joiners into the business to get up and ready with supporting our members.
Yeah, of course. So first thing to note is that through the onboarding process, we're constantly asking new joiners, like, is there anything we could do better? Is there anything we can improve? So I'm going to tell you the training now, but by the time you might join, it might be slightly different. But basically, you will come in as a new joiner. In the first week, you have introductions to different teams, but not just your own, like you'll get introductions to kind of like the sales team, even like the talent team, and get introductions to like the bids team. So you can see as a business and like company-wide, how does everything all fit together, if that makes sense. And then in the second week and third week of your training, you'll get really like hands-on support into your specific role. So you'll have loads of videos from other OEs you can kind of watch and refer back to. You'll get loads of slides to kind of read through information on how we support our members, what the member journey looks like. You'll be taken through it step by step, where your role come into it, kind of questions that have come up, specific member cases. And then you'll also have opportunities to shadow OEs. So when I joined, I think I probably did shadow like Daniela. I probably shadowed like 10 other people in the team, just like watching how they work. Again, not just my own role, but for like different parts of the member journey. So say right now, I started training to do a house hunting role. But in that, I also watch the assessment people, like assess our members, so I can kind of see before our members got to us, what would it look like for them? What's their journey been like? So training wise, you get a really good overview of what's going on, because there's a lot of moving parts of Beam, a lot of different things that fit together, but you see that. And then in the side of like emotionally actually working with members, like we were saying, like you come from loads of different backgrounds. And personally, I had no caseworker experience at all. I was a bit worried about this side of things, like how will I be able to actually support our members and like emotionally give them time? But you have like safeguarding, like procedures you go through. You'll again do role plays with different OEs where they will be a member and kind of give you a case where there might be like a safeguarding issue and you can work through that. Again, if you're shadowing an OE, you might see that they will have someone who has been in a bit of a tricky situation and they need a bit more support. So you'll ask questions like, oh, what would you do if you're supporting this member? Like, how should I go about it? And then you have Sam, who's kind of like our head of practice. And if you were ever thinking like, oh, I've had a bit of a situation with a member, I'm not quite sure how to tackle it, like it is so encouraged to literally be like, oh, okay, next steps, I'm not quite sure, I just want to double check my manager, and you will go and straight away discuss with your manager like what to do next, how to support the member, and each case you'll kind of have someone to work through it, because supporting members is one of those things where you learn it kind of as you're doing it. You can't, no amount of training is ever going to be able to like just prepare you for it, so it's kind of as you do it. But the really great thing is if you do come away from a bit of an upsetting or difficult conversation with your like member, you have a form you'll fill out, so it's recorded and everything, and at the end of the form it literally says like, okay, check in with yourself, take 10 minutes, see how you're feeling, are you okay, have you let your manager know this is happening, so you've got someone to support you, and then your manager will check in with you. So the emotional side of the training is really that you kind of learn as you go, but there is so much support around you, and that's where that training comes into it.
Fantastic. That was so detailed and so thorough. Thank you so much, Amir. That was fantastic. You actually answered a couple of other questions in the thread that had come up while you were going through, and one of those was in relation to, I guess, the kind of counselling support that we have internally at Beam. And you mentioned Sam, who has been a caseworker at Beam, I think, for about 4 years now, and has recently grown into a kind of practice lead that we have here at Beam. And his role is very much, just as you said, Amir, about supporting people to come into the organisation, but also to navigate perhaps those slightly more complex member conversations. So thank you for answering questions that you didn't even know you were being asked. I'm conscious of time, and what I want to say is just thank you so much to Daniela, to Ruben, and to Amira for your time this afternoon. I can sense from the chat that's coming through in the Q&A that it's been really appreciated. As I mentioned, I do appreciate that we haven't been able to get to every question that was asked. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop into the chat for everyone our careers email. So if you want to send us any follow-up questions off the back of the webinar today, that's absolutely fine. Feel free to send us an email there. And ultimately, it seems like this group is a really fantastic, committed group and got a huge amount of experience and lots of really detailed questions. So I'm sure that we would love to see some applications coming in from you. And hopefully I'll get to meet you along with Sophie in the next couple of weeks. We have, Amira's got a raised hand. What would you like to say, Amira?
I was just going to say, if anyone has any questions related to like house hunting in particular or overall, I'm sure Daniela and Ruben will also agree, like message me on LinkedIn, be happy to like answer any really specific questions about the actual role if you know you're applying for a similar one.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, team. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining today.